In 1607, a small group of English settlers arrived on the shores of North America, believing they were building a future of opportunity and freedom. But what if the American colonies were never meant to become a free nation? What if they were designed instead as profit machines built on land seizure, forced labor, and imperial control? From Jamestown to Massachusetts, from royal charters to bloody wars, Britain's colonies were not accidental settlements. They were part of a calculated global strategy. To understand the United States today, its government, its economy, even its conflicts, we must first understand the British colonies that shaped it. Welcome to Chronoverse, where we explore America's past, present, and future through history, power, and truth. Today's documentary explains the British colonies in North America, how they began, why Britain created them, who controlled them, and how colonial rule laid the foundations of modern America. This is not a mythologized story of pilgrims and pioneers. It is a reality-based examination of imperial ambition, economic exploitation, resistance, and transformation. This is the true story of the British colonies explained. Europe's race for empire, late 15th, 16th century. By the late 15th century, European powers had entered what historians call the Age of Exploration. Advances in navigation, shipbuilding, and cartography allowed nations to cross oceans in search of wealth and influence. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, sailing under the Spanish crown, reached the Caribbean. His voyage marked the beginning of Spain's large-scale colonization of Central and South America, where vast amounts of gold and silver were extracted and shipped to Europe. At the same time, Portugal established control over key maritime trade routes, linking Europe to Africa and Asia, dominating the spice and slave trades. France began building settlements in North America, particularly in present-day Canada, focusing on the fur trade. Compared to these rivals, England was late to overseas expansion and increasingly concerned about falling behind in wealth and global power. Under Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled from 1558 to 1603, England actively pursued colonization as a national strategy. Overseas colonies were seen as a way to expand trade, secure raw materials, reduce unemployment and poverty at home, and challenge the dominance of Spain and France. These early English colonies were not designed to promote liberty or independence. They were conceived as instruments of profit, control, and imperial competition. Jamestown, 1607, Britain's first permanent colony. England's first lasting foothold in North America came in May 1607, when the Virginia Company of London, a private joint stock company, established the settlement of Jamestown in present-day Virginia. Unlike later religious settlements, Jamestown was a commercial venture whose primary goal was to generate profit for investors in England. The colony's early years were marked by extreme hardship. Settlers faced malaria and dysentery, severe food shortages, poor leadership, and unfamiliar environmental conditions. Relations with the local Powhatan Confederacy, led by Chief Powhatan, were tense and often violent. Between 1609 and 1610, Jamestown experienced a catastrophic famine known as the Starving Time, during which nearly 80% of the settlers died. Jamestown survived largely because of stricter discipline and leadership, particularly under Captain John Smith, who imposed forced labor policies to ensure food production. The colony's fortunes changed after John Rolfe successfully introduced the cultivation of tobacco around 1612. Tobacco became a highly profitable export crop, transforming Virginia into a viable colony, but it also created an intense demand for labor. Slavery and the colonial economy, 1619 onward. In 1619, A Dutch ship arrived in Jamestown carrying Africans who had been captured from a Portuguese slave ship. This event marked the beginning of African presence in English North America. Initially, some Africans were treated similarly to indentured servants, but over the course of the 17th century, colonial laws increasingly defined Africans as permanently enslaved. By the late 1600s, racialized chattel slavery had become firmly embedded in colonial law and society. The economic success of the British colonies relied heavily on enslaved African labor, especially in plantation regions. Colonists also expanded by forcibly taking land from Native American nations, pushing indigenous communities off their ancestral territories. These systems of land seizure, forced labor, and export-based agriculture generated enormous wealth for Britain while laying the economic foundations of what would become the United States. New England colonies, religion and control. In 1620, a group of English separatists known as the Pilgrims arrived aboard the Mayflower and founded Plymouth Colony. A decade later, in 1630, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was established by Puritans under the leadership of John Winthrop. These settlers were motivated by religious beliefs, seeking to build communities based on their interpretation of Christianity. However, religious freedom was limited. Puritan authorities enforced strict moral codes and closely regulated behavior. Those who disagreed with Puritan beliefs, such as Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, were banished, while others faced punishment or execution. The colonies also expanded aggressively, leading to violent conflicts with Native American tribes. One of the most brutal conflicts was the Pequot War, 1636-1638, in which English settlers and their native allies nearly destroyed the Pequot people. In New England, religion shaped social life, but intolerance and coercion shaped political power. Middle colonies, trade, and diversity. The middle colonies developed differently. New York, originally founded by the Dutch as New Amsterdam, was seized by England in 1664. Pennsylvania was established in 1681 by William Penn, a Quaker who envisioned a colony based on religious tolerance and peaceful coexistence. These colonies benefited from fertile land and access to major rivers, making them centers of trade and agriculture. Philadelphia quickly grew into one of the largest and most prosperous cities in colonial America. Pennsylvania promoted representative assemblies in its early years, negotiated treaties with Native American tribes rather than relying solely on violence. Despite this relative diversity and tolerance, continued land expansion eventually displaced indigenous nations, showing that economic growth still came at the expense of native populations. In the southern colonies, Virginia, Maryland, the Carolinas, and Georgia, economic life revolved around large plantations. Cash crops such as tobacco, rice, and indigo generated immense wealth for a small elite of landowners. This wealth was made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans who endured harsh and often deadly conditions. Colonial society in the South was sharply divided. Political power was concentrated in the hands of wealthy white planters, while poor white settlers had limited influence. Native American communities were steadily pushed westward as plantation agriculture expanded. Inequality was not accidental, it was built into the colonial system from the beginning. By the early 18th century, Britain exercised strict control over its American colonies. Laws such as the Navigation Acts, first passed in 1651, required colonial goods to be traded only with Britain or British ships. These policies benefited British merchants but limited colonial economic freedom. Although colonists paid taxes and followed British laws, they had no representation in the British Parliament. For many years, this system was tolerated because the colonies prospered. That balance changed when Britain faced financial crisis. French and Indian War 1754-1763. From 1754 to 1763, Britain and France fought the French and Indian War for control of North America. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Paris, 1763, which gave Britain vast new territories east of the Mississippi River. Victory came at a high cost. Britain was left deeply in debt and decided that the colonies should help pay for the war. Parliament imposed new taxes, including the Stamp Act 1765, Townshend Acts 1767, and Tea Act 1773. These measures sparked widespread anger and resistance among colonists. Road to Revolution. Tensions escalated throughout the 1770s. Events such as the Boston Massacre, 1770, and the Boston Tea Party, 1773, symbolized growing defiance against British authority. Britain responded with military force and harsh laws aimed at restoring control. In 1775, armed conflict broke out at Lexington and Concord, marking the beginning of open war. 1 year later, in 1776, the 13 colonies declared independence. The colonial system created to generate profit for Britain had instead produced a revolutionary movement. Legacy of the British colonies. British colonial rule left a lasting imprint on the United States. American law was shaped by English common law, while political institutions drew heavily from British models of governance. At the same time, colonial systems created deep economic inequalities and racial divisions that continued to affect American society. The United States inherited both the ideals of representative government and the unresolved contradictions of colonial rule. Understanding the British colonies is essential to understanding America itself, its origins, its challenges, and its ongoing struggle to live up to its ideals. The British colonies were not born from liberty. They were built from ambition, control, and profit. Yet from within that system, resistance emerged, and a new nation was formed. Understanding the British colonies helps us understand modern America, its strengths, its struggles, and its unfinished promises. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and leave your comments telling us what you think and what topic we should cover next.